Hello everybody, it's Adrian Plass here again.
Yeah, and Bridget. And it's Easter Monday, which is another day, of course, that's usually associated with being a bank holiday, going out, having really nice times. I think it's kind of a bit of a difficult day for a lot of people.
I think it's very different for some. In fact, as you know, we've had a few emails lately from people who not just a little bit worried, things are kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about people without faith. We're very much talking about people who have lived with faith or a life of faith. And to be honest, don't quite know how to put this, but and I know these things are worse in the middle of the night. I mean, they all build up, don't they?
Yeah.
But it isn't helped, I don't think, by being told or preached at or taught that you shouldn't be afraid and you just have to regain your faith. Well, that's not a means of regaining your faith, is it?
No, it's not. In fact, it's a means of condemning you and making you feel...
It can make you feel very bad indeed. And just for those people who are feeling like that, and believe me, we know that feeling. We really, really do. We put a short prayer on the website today, and if that's something that reflects how you're feeling, please use it. We shall certainly use it, and we do understand how that feels. We really, really do.
There's a song we sing in our church, you may sing in yours, which I really have grown to value a lot, and that's no longer a slave to fear. In other words, yes, of course we'll feel frightened, but I don't know, we're not necessarily allowing it to dictate our lives. My dad actually did allow fear to dictate his life. He was a very worried man, and he was always panicking. And when I say he was security conscious, he was security conscious times about 150. I'll just give you one example. My mum and dad had a little summer house. Now, they didn't have a very big garden, so the little summer house wasn't actually very far from the back door. And they used to enjoy in the summer going and sitting in their summer house and having a cup of tea. Well, my father had a key to the garage, which was hanging in the kitchen. I have to get this order right. He had a key for the garage hanging in the kitchen. He would go into the garage and get a key to the shed, and in the shed was the key to the summer house. So by the time he got all that sorted out, they'd go and have their coffee, which would take about a half an hour. And then, of course, they returned to the house, and my father would put the key to the summer house in the shed, and then the key to the shed in the garage, and finally, triumphantly, bring the key from the garage back into the kitchen.
That all reminds me of something I wrote about the Anglican notices, which perhaps we'll do one of these days about keys. But the thing about your father that I pointed out to you very early on in our acquaintance was that he actually led a very exciting life. I mean, for him, it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark. If somebody knocked on the door, he would jump out of his chair and say, "Who's that, Kathleen? Who will that be at the door now?" So anything, the sort of thing we'd say, "Oh, I wonder who that is at the door." For him, it was quite an event. So he led quite an excited life, really.
He did, but he also led a life that wasn't free from fear. And Adrian wrote this poem very much with him in mind, about the sort of fears that can grip you when there's nothing really to be frightened about. No burglars came again last night, just as they failed to come the night before. And for all the nights I can remember, no burglars yet again. Although I listened, as I always do for them, once more they did not oil and ease the rusty bolt that holds the garden gate beside the shed, beside the house. Nor did I hear them moving in the yard at some heart-sobbing, wretched hour. It was the ticking of a clock upon my wall that sounded like the pad of evil steps 100 feet away. They did not come. They were not there again last night. But what if they should never come? Such a waste of nights. I might have slept, but if I had, I feel quite sure they would have come, those burglars. Oh yes, they would have come.
as Justin Welby pointed out in his, it was a great talk, wasn't it, on Easter Sunday morning.
Oh, the Radio 4 service, yes,
yeah.
it was.
He said a number of interesting things, but he pointed out that the disciples were locked in the same way that we are locked down.
And very afraid.
Now, and very afraid. And there's a rather touching moment, I think, when we learn that they didn't recognize him, the disciples, when he reappeared in the flesh, literally, and the fact that he was there didn't enable them to recognize him. The fact that he spoke to them didn't enable them to recognize him.
Well, they thought he was a ghost.
They thought he was a ghost.
Yeah.
And in fact, the thing that did the trick was when he said, and we don't know his tone, so I can only guess it, but I imagine he said, "Look, give me a bit of fish." And he ate the fish, and then, obviously, they knew who he was. It's very sweet, isn't it?
It's kind of breaking right into the fear that sometimes can make you panic so much you actually can't see what's right in front of you, and just bringing it down to earth. You've often said, and I agree with you actually, that humour is not the poor relative of serious ministry. And I think we need a lot of humour at the moment.
Well, on the contrary, I mean, we know, because we've seen it for ourselves over the last 20 or 30 years, and particularly over the last 10 years, I suppose, that there are times when humour kind of explodes things and takes away some of the darkness. I wrote this a while ago. I don't know how it'll go down at the moment, but it's about phobias. And I was writing about things that would help you to avoid responsibility in the church.
Oh, right.
As is my wont. These are the ones I thought of, and they're real phobias, I promise. One is Porphyra Phobia, and I suggested that would help in avoiding the Bishop's Lent course, because it's a fear of purple. Ichthyophobia is the fear of fish, which would help with not having to be involved in the Christian car parking situation when there were loads of cars coming in. And there are one or two others here. Oh, here's an amazing one. Again, I promise you this is a real phobia. This would avoid you having to take a group of lonely folk, this is a bit contrived, out for a meal at a Chinese restaurant, and it's consequentiliophobia.
And that is what?
That is the fear of chopsticks. I promise you it is. And finally, to avoid attending the midweek prayer meeting, you might claim to suffer from monophobia, which is the fear of being alone.
Right. Well, I've got a couple for you, Adrian. What do you think turophobia is?
How do you spell that?
T-U-R-O, phobia?
Turophobia.
I probably pronounced
I
that wrong.
have no idea.
Well, you don't suffer from this because it's fear of cheese. Okay? And just one more.
Right.
Diepnophobia.
How do you spell that?
Diepnophobia? Oh, D-I-E-P-N-O.
Fear of going to the north of France?
No. No, it's fear of dinner parties and having to make conversation.
Oh, I'm not really frightened of that. I'm a gabby person.
Yes, but I am.
Not
So
frightened of that. No.
I think I've got that one a bit. But actually, interestingly enough, when I was looking at these phobias, I found that they were in the nursing degree guide. In other words, we may find them funny, but they're not very funny if you do suffer from them. I became very conscious of that a while ago. I was thinking about agoraphobia, and I was thinking about the fact that I can walk to my garden gate, no problem. But there's so many things I can't do. There's so many things I am afraid of. Quite a long list, really. And, I think we just have to be careful in allowing that other people's fears are real, so we don't dismiss them, but at the same time we help them to look at them and kind of maybe get them in perspective if they're dominating their lives, which comes back to you, doesn't it, Adrian? And something that has dominated your life in the past.
Well, this is absurd. In fact, I think I lay myself open to charges of being completely bonkers.
Not for the first time.
No, the trouble with me is I start with something I kind of mean, and then it kind of grows. And the problem was I was asked if there were any fruits that frightened me. Now, I know that's a ridiculous question, but you do get asked ridiculous questions. And my answer to that was, The only thing I can think of that is in any way comes into that category is tomatoes.
Right.
And I mean, I have known a lot of disappointment, I have to say, in oranges, satsumas and tangerine context, and I will have to talk to you about that a little later. But the tomato issue is very complex. I've always used tomato ketchup, but tomato ketchup is not tomatoes. See what I mean? In fact, as a child, one of my favourite rhyming couplets was "Shake, oh shake the ketchup bottle, first none'll come and then a lot'll," which is absolutely true. Anyway, so although tomatoes kind of worry me, they really do. Half a tomato in a salad, I always give them to you, don't I? And you keep giving them to me to eat. But it's not simple. It's not simple because I actually love cheese and tomato sandwiches. And
you do.
That's got nothing to do with tomatoes. And also, as I already mentioned, ketchup. My favourite soup.
I know, it's tomato
soup. And
you're not proving your point.
I know I'm not. And also, sun-dried tomatoes are one of my most favourite things in the world. So although I register this fear... Now, here's the interesting thing. My friend Peter Ryder had a sort of Damascus Road experience. Is this true with tomatoes?
Right.
He never wanted tomatoes. One day, this Damascus Road, it didn't actually happen on the Damascus Road. It happened on the road to Pocklington.
Oh, I thought it was the A68.
It may have been, but it was on the road to Pocklington, wherever that was. He stopped in a lay-by to eat a sandwich prepared by somebody he didn't know. And as he bit into it, he entered into what he described as a sort of dual reality. He found himself eating pieces of tomato and cheese, and he really, really enjoyed it. So for Peter, life was never the same after that. He stopped kicking against the goads, and he gave himself over to tomatoes. Now, was that God or was that God? I think that was God intervening and making sure Peter learned to love tomatoes.
And what was that you were saying about oranges and blaming me for
Oh, well, all our lives.
Yes.
It is true, isn't it? I mean, it's 50 years now. You've been passing me bits of orange and saying, "You're like this is really sweet." And each time I've tried to believe you, and each time it is not. And I am probably never going to eat oranges ever. So there.
But that doesn't mean you're fighting that particular fear too strongly, really, does it?
No, not really. No.
So, laughter. Really, really important, but it goes with something else, doesn't it? It goes with love. Laughter and love, they are two pretty strong weapons against the sort of fear that just gets you to a point you can't cope on an everyday basis, really.
And for those who wish to adhere to the teaching of the Bible very closely, and this is actually a very serious point, isn't it? The Bible says perfect love casts out fear.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that faith casts out fear.
Perfect faith, no.
And perfect love, or love, has to be there. It doesn't say pretending that you feel love casts out fear.
No.
And so we mentioned a little poem that we put on the website. Prayer, sorry. Have a look at that, because it's really about what is real, what really helps, and asking God to help you with that. And it's very important for some
keep
people.
laughing and keep loving.
Lots of laughter, lots of love.
Kind of gets in the cracks of fear when you've built up a bit of a barrier, doesn't it? They slide through the cracks.
Yeah, and we're going to have a lot of laughs this week, can't we?
I think we need them, so I think we will.
I think we will. So have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, goodbye.
God bless. Bye-bye.